Well, hello and welcome to Cisco Live Spain. This talk here is demystifying zero trust, a technical truth versus marketing FUD. Now, what does that mean, a technical truth and marketing FUD? Well, to me personally and to a lot of others, zero trust has become like cloud. It's basically a marketing term now. People use it as a way to want to sell you something. However, zero trust, in its real formality, should be a guideline. And if you don't know what a guideline is not required, like a policy. A guideline is like industry best practices. So ideally, it's recommendations for best practice for security. So my goal today, I'm going to have two things I'm going to do for you. First, I'm going to explain really what it is. I'm going to define zero trust, how we got here, what it means, the actual guideline. And second, I'm going to talk about how you can take this guideline and apply it towards your security capabilities. So ideally, use it to help you be more secure. Hopefully you'll walk away after seeing this presentation understanding what zero trust is, and you can actually really talk about it, not the marketing FUD that's out there, and then also be able to apply it. Now, you may wonder, who am I? Like, why listen to me? The name is Joseph Muniz, or Joey. And I cover America, South America, and Canada for everything security at Cisco. I also, as you can see, I write a bunch of books. Now, I'm not bragging by showing the books. The idea is you can get an idea of my look at security. Like, I'm the guy that writes the pen test book, the Security Operations Center best practice book. Yeah, I do some product stuff too, but I try to look at security holistically. I do have some new publications. I have a new Security Operations Center book, not on Cisco Press, coming out this year. I have a VPN book, yeah, product oriented, but more for the certification update for the CCNP certification. I have an ICE class coming out. It's a video ICE class. And I have training I'll be doing throughout the year for various certs. So that's my publications. I got a blog, thesecurityblogger.com, where you can see a lot of labs and stuff I talk about. And then lastly, a little personal note, I'm a football or an America soccer player, where here, if you're in Spain, you may find me on the evenings. The next couple nights, I'll be out there hacking away at the local Spaniards on the football field. So that's who I am. And again, this is about zero trust holistically, not about basically a marketing pitch. So, by the way, I have to mention, since if you are here in Spain, I have two other sessions. I have a session today at 5 p.m., which is going to be about reversing malware. Don't be intimidated by the malware term. I will be covering this of all levels, so basic to advanced. And then in 2 days, I'll be running a lab, which, by the way, hang with me. At the end of this presentation, I will give you my email where you can request access to the same lab and be able to do things like the zero trust concepts I'll be covering today. So if you're here live in Spain with me, come check out these sessions. And if not, as I mentioned, you can reach out to me and I can give you a lot of the same content after today's Cisco Live event. Okay, so let's start off with the concept of zero trust. What is zero trust? What is people talking about? Let's get through, let's demystify the FUD. So, back in the day, security was simple. And when I say security, cybersecurity. Essentially, people would put up walls. So imagine your firewall, maybe IPS, maybe antivirus. You put up these gateways on your edge, or you put up the software in your endpoint, and you're done. But the simple concept of defeat is, what if something gets on the network? So, as time has gone on, and this attack and defend constant change kept happening, security has become more complicated as a reaction to the attacks becoming more complicated. So you can't just rely anymore on, I buy this product and I forget about it. Any industry certification is going to tell you best practice is people, process, and technology. You don't just go buy something and set it and forget it. It requires process, people actually looking at it, etc. So that is actually best practice. So hopefully we all understand now, it's not as simple as putting a firewall on the network. There's a lot more to security. Now what's happened is, people create these guidelines, and I mentioned zero trust being a guideline. ISO is another guideline. NIST, that's another guideline. These are recommendations for best practice. And as security has become more complex, people try to explain it via go to this guideline and learn about the best practice. Where zero trust is pretty much the same idea. People initially thought about the idea of least privilege and then started building upon that term of what should be the best practice for trust. Because essentially, that's what security is about. It's protecting data. Anybody will tell you also, data is protecting the data confidentiality, integrity, and availability, or the CIA. So any certification, the CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which is all about data. So zero trust is all about protecting data. Over time, analysts started taking these terms and started throwing out, well, what is best practice for protecting data? And that's where like Forrester, Gartner, a lot of the analysts said, you know what? We're going to call this thing, eventually coined, zero trust. So that's how this terminology, that's how we got here today. But here's the challenge. It's not just least privilege. I ask a lot of customers, what is zero trust? What is it to you? And they throw out, oh, least privilege. Now, if you don't know, by definition, least privilege is provide the least amount of access required to do your job. So if I'm an employee, but I'm not in HR, I shouldn't see people's personal information. I should just have access to what I need to do my job. That's least privilege. But again, that is not zero trust. So if somebody says that's zero trust, no. Least privilege is a concept for security, and it's an element of zero trust. So what is zero trust? How do we actually define it? How would you explain it to me? Here's how I would explain it to you. Here is a definition. Zero trust is about people, it's about the technology, and it's about the data within the technology. It's all three of those. Now, some of you may say, well, I understand that, Joey, I got it. However, this is the old definition of zero trust. So just by addressing people, addressing technology, and addressing the endpoint doesn't mean you're doing zero trust. Because again, we're talking guideline, best practice. So here is what I would call the misconception or old zero trust, the original definition of zero trust, which is not the current best guidelines. If you look at these three, the first one is eliminate network trust. To some people, this means if I do multi-factor authentication, I'm good. I'm going to challenge that. The second is if I do segmentation, I'm good. I'm going to challenge that as well. And lastly, if I do continuous monitoring, I'm good. So all I need is multi-factor authentication, segmentation, and monitor things. I have zero trust. Here's the challenge. And I want you to think about this because you may say, what the heck is this guy talking about? I'm doing this and I think I'm secure. Here's the challenge. First off, it's called the golden ticket. You can do 10,000 factors of authentication, but if you don't continuously challenge a person, if it's authenticate them and then give them access to everything, if the attacker can compromise that device, they'll have access to everything. So this idea of zero trust for users has got to be ongoing. You can't just check one time and give full access. And I'll give you some best practice in a little bit. The second is segmentation, which is fine, but what about if something gets inside a segment? A lot of people have challenges with, and they use these terms like micro-segmentation, where I'm going to keep segmenting and segmenting, but at some point, devices have got to communicate. And if a device gets on the network or a segment, that's called establishing a foothold. And then from there, they're an insider threat, and all they need to do is get between other segments or attack systems within that segment, and they're going to basically get into your network and do malicious things. Understand exploitation? It's called chain exploitation. It's never remember like Jack Bauer and like 24, there was a person, Chloe O'Brien, who would go, all right, I'm in. Like, Jack, shut off the cameras. I'm in. It doesn't work that way. It requires you to gain a foothold, understand the network, and do different exploits to eventually get your way to the data. So my point is, if you're going to do segmentation, but allow easy access to a segment, you're allowing a foothold on your network. The last one is network visibility or continuous monitoring. Now, what I find when I ask questions, what are you monitoring? What they're actually monitoring is just the edge. They have a next-gen firewall or some product on the edge, maybe some host stuff, and they got some general logs coming, but they can only see what they see. If you're not looking at inside the network, for example, then you're blind. Give you a common example. A lot of people for data center security is a firewall on the edge, but nothing on the inside. Even though 90% of the traffic is inside the data center, it's all happening in here, they're just seeing what's coming and going. Another example, on the endpoints. Do you know about the processes? Do you know what's actually running on the endpoints? Later, as I mentioned today, I'm going to talk about reversing malware, where I'm going to basically disassemble malware and talk about how malware will hide on your endpoint and disguise itself as basically trusted resources and trusted processes. So are you monitoring that? Probably not. So continuous monitoring is not monitoring the edge, it's monitoring everything. And to me, these are the challenges, these are the gaps in the old method of zero trust. Because of this, the attackers are targeting these three areas. We're seeing a continuous rise in identity theft, because again, they know if I can steal the identity, regardless of their authentication, then I can get access. And once I'm past the multi-factor, I'm freaking in. Second, they understand that a lot of these IoT devices use apps. And the apps and the IoT devices, in both cases, suck at security. I live in America, in the USA, and where I live, there are no laws to enforce IoT security. Only California. And that law sucks. It's like so easy to work around that any big manufacturer can get a lawyer and work their way around. So my point is, there's no law, there's no reason to force IoT devices to patch and be secure. Now, some vendors are very good. I'll give props to Apple. When Apple finds a vulnerability, they almost force you, like, you have to update this right now. But the majority of IoT devices is not like that. So essentially, you could have a device on the network, you're doing everything you can, but it's vulnerable and an attacker could own it because there is no fix available because of poor development. Your only option really is segmentation and monitoring in that use case. So again, attackers are exposing the weaknesses of the old approach to zero trust. I'll give you some examples. I got somewhat infamous in 2013 for a talk I did at RSA. This is Emily Williams. Emily Williams doesn't really exist. So she works at a restaurant at the time. I can't name the restaurant, but they have like owls and they have orange shorts and they sell chicken wings. I don't know if you know what restaurant I'm talking about. If you don't, Google orange shorts, owls, chicken wings, attractive women. You'll know what restaurant I'm talking about. Well, this person worked there. She gave me some pictures because I basically was doing a penetration test at a company located right across the street. And the idea was, can I own this company just using Facebook and just using LinkedIn? So we created this fake person, and literally within an hour, we were being endorsed for her Cisco skills. So congratulations on your CCNA. Yeah, I know Emily Williams. This is all bull crap. Like this is, again, I made this person up and took pictures of this person at the restaurant, yet people are still endorsing her. Within a few days, we were basically social engineering IT. The person in charge of mailing laptops was on Facebook. I noticed who that was, and as Emily Williams said, hey, do you want to be my friend? And that person was like, hey, do I know you? Here's the challenge, think about this. Do you actually know your own Facebook footprint? This is what I did. I looked on Facebook and saw 10 years ago that the guy worked at Hungry Howie's Pizza. So I said, you don't remember me? And I clicked Hungry Howie's Pizza and saw the person had 5 friends, one named Derek. And I was like, I was Derek's girlfriend. You don't remember me from 10 years ago? I'm Emily Williams, Derek's girlfriend. Then I clicked Derek's Facebook page, and it said current location, New York City. And I was like, hey, yeah, I was in New York City, ran into Derek, and basically, he told me that you happen to work here as well, and so happens I'm a new hire. Hey, by the way, I don't start for a week and a half because I have to finish my contract, but I would love to get a laptop and start working today. I got a laptop sent to me. Now, you may think, oh, this whole social engineering thing was just that. No, much more. We actually to go back on this concept here, we actually did what's called the browser injection framework. It's called Beef. It's a browser attack. And at Christmas time, we posted Christmas cards on Facebook to a lot of the employees. If you clicked our Christmas card, you would see reindeers dancing around Merry Christmas, but we would be doing a browser injection attack, and the attempt was to basically steal credentials and screenshots, that kind of stuff, which we did, got VPN access, and owned the hell out of this customer. So again, you can do multi-factor all day long. If you get owned by beef, I'm doing browser injection to your network. If I get VPN access, doesn't matter about that, I'm already authorized. I'm stealing your credentials. Now, the second thing is, well, what about endpoint security? Well, I did a talk at DEF CON, a hacking conference last year, where I hacked back. And the idea is, you can wrap a payload, you can wrap a backdoor in any trusted software. So when I said continuous monitoring, but you're not monitoring the data center, you're not monitoring the endpoints, it is actually easier than you think to create a backdoor and put a backdoor on a computer. What I'm showing here is exploit code that you can use using Kali Linux Metasploit. This is vanilla. This is like the hello world of programming. It takes you 30 seconds to create this backdoor in Metasploit. Then on the right, I have a tool called Sienna Spyware 1, old wrapper, which literally you can take any application and wrap the backdoor in the application. So if you remember like Napster days, you can take a music file, a program, whatever it is, and wrap a backdoor, and if the user opens that file, you own them. Now, this is Magic Land. I know it'll be recorded, but in Magic Land, I wanted to hack back because there's these a-holes that will call you and say, hey, I work for Dell support, and try to trick people into installing stuff. So what I did in Magic Land was basically struck back. And I don't recommend doing this, by the way. But what I'm showing here is, first I created a payload, the same way that I just explained. I went into Metasploit and created a payload. Now, these people sent me this document saying, we are Dell support. And here's a document, fill this out, and then they're going to start basically abusing my computer. So I took this backdoor and placed it into their own Word document and sent it back. Now, here's a disclaimer. I'm dumb, and I didn't actually fill out the document initially. I just got all excited and sent a blank document back. But it doesn't matter. All I need them to do is open the document. So what I'm doing here is I'm pasting the macro of basically the backdoor into the Word document, where if you open the Word document, this will be hidden, this part here. But what would happen is, you would essentially be installing my backdoor while opening this document unknowingly. So now the next piece is the phishing attack, and I'm basically phishing back. So I emailed them back this document, and I wait for them to open it. Now again, I messed up. I didn't actually fill out the document because I'm dumb, but I'm waiting, and I'm waiting and waiting, saying hopefully this guy will open the document, and eventually the person opens the document. When he or she opens the document, now I have a backdoor to their computer. So it's like hacking back. Now I got all excited and started like, you're gonna see me fat finger some stuff, but first what I did was I opened access to their desktop. I wanna actually see their computer. So you're gonna see, now I see the person's desktop. At this point, the guy's like, why didn't you fill anything out? And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, let me fill out the document, but this is the person's desktop. And then from there, I filled out the document and sent them the actual document, but it doesn't matter, I already own them. Now my buddy who did the research with me works at a different company, so I'm not allowed to show the video. But what we did next was I turned on the camera, and you can see the guy had a turban and a beard. I can see the call center where they're basically doing these attacks across the world. Now in Magic Land, I destroyed the guy's computer and their data center, but I probably made them more secure because essentially now they know that people could strike back, and they probably could just get another computer and be good with it. So again, I don't recommend hacking back. It's illegal in many countries, and anything, I'm making them more secure. But my point is, I wanted to show how easy it is to wrap a backdoor and do the same thing that they're doing to you. So if you think your antivirus is good enough, if you think your continuously monitoring is good enough, I challenge that. And then lastly is IoT. Oh, IoT. As I mentioned, the manufacturers, in a lot of cases, suck at security. All these devices are examples of devices that I have owned with IoT. Now you may say, well, how do I do it? This is Joey's top 5 for hacking IoT. First off, understand a lot of devices have USB and micro USB, and you can plug in and get access to the IoT device. Now my favorite way to exploit IoT is basically IoT devices have firmware. And in a lot of cases, you can go to the website and download the image. You just download the update. I just showed you take spyware Sienna 1 and wrap a backdoor, and then just get them to install the update, and boom, you've popped that box. Because most IoT devices only look at the size of the file and the format. they don't have like a firmware validation like Cisco's like Catalyst switches or something that validates this is not a valid version of code. No, they don't. This is IoT. Long as the size and format is correct, your money and it'll run, including the back door that I just planted. So that's another way. A lot of the applications are very vulnerable. I did a talk where we're hacking these jukeboxes in New York City, where the jukebox would go to an app, and the app would call down the playlist. So all we did was pop the app, and we would play that song Hanson, like doo-wop. It's like doo-wop, doo, that really annoying Hanson song, and I would cue it 10,000 times. So imagine being at a bar, hearing this cheesy song over and over and over again, and they got pissed, so they would unplug the jukebox, plug it back in, the jukebox would go to the app and download another 10, restart the queue, Hanson 10,000 times. My buddy and I also hacked some toilets, where the toilets had speakers. We played Hanson. We made the toilets hot. We shot water in the air. So a lot of times you're hacking the application, not even the IoT device. So, and JTAG, by the way. JTAG, a lot of the IoT devices, you literally can open them up, and if you have a JTAG tap, you tap into it and you get root. Because what it is a lot of the IoT devices are buying chipboards from China and other countries, so they need a way to test the chipboard. But they don't know how to get to the chipboard, so they use JTAG, which means as an attacker, you can open it up and do the same thing. Again, IoT devices are very vulnerable. Just assume that they're high risk. With that being said, zero trust is not a firewall. Think about what I just talked about. How is a firewall going to help you on me wrapping backdoors in the back inside a computer? Zero trust isn't least privilege. What about IoT? There's no user. Zero trust is not network access control. Think about users off network. Think about cloud. This is what I mean when I say zero trust has become marketing FUD. Firewall vendors, access control vendors, IoT, IaaS or identity type tools. All these vendors are saying, buy us and you have zero trust. They're all elements of zero trust. I would argue and say, yes, they can provide value for a zero trust architecture, but they themselves are not zero trust. This is what zero trust is. According to Zero Trust Extended, whatever framework or analyst you're going to talk to, this is the leading zero trust model, which is zero trusting people, workloads, and data. What do I mean about zero trust of people? Zero trust of people means you can't just authenticate one time and get access to everything. Zero trust for people means you do that, but once they're on the network, you authenticate them again. So for example, at Cisco, I have to do my multi-factor authentication, and we use Cisco Duo, so I have to prove I have my phone, I know my password, but then when I'm on the network and I go to access my expense report, the expense report says, are you Joey? If I go and I have to log into some other sensitive system, that application will request for me to log in. So there's no inherent trust for me. I log in to prove who I am as I access things. Now this may sound annoying, but with Duo as an example, it's super easy. I just click to prove I still have my phone and I am who I am. And that allows where if somebody steals my identity, they may not have my phone. Some people at Duo even argue, do we need passwords anymore? I'm not going to go there. But I would say that a solution that allows you to continue to authenticate people is the right approach. From Duo from Cisco is one example of that. Another example is the workload. And I've already talked about this. Do you know what's running on your endpoint? Could you tell that I've just phished you and you've installed or ran that Word document, but a backdoor is now running? Most people I talk to, that's a challenge, especially in a data center. They have no visibility of what's running on the servers, and essentially they have problems with security. Here's a concept. What do you think is more secure? Whitelisting or blacklisting? Think about that. What is more secure, whitelisting or blacklisting? Hopefully, most of you are saying whitelisting. Yet, why is it that most people do blacklists? Because of convenience. Just to be clear, blacklist means these are bad, everything else is good. Whitelist means only trust this, everything else is evil. That's why whitelisting is better. But in most data centers and in many cases, we're doing blacklisting because we don't know how to whitelist. we can say this is what's trusted, but 5 seconds later, everything changes. What you need is a way to understand the process level and the changes associated with the process level so you can start to enforce whitelist security. So I would actually argue and say that you need a monitoring solution that continuously monitors and creates policy. From Cisco, the technology I'm talking about is tetration, where tetration will learn and adapt and create whitelists that you can then spread throughout your technology. So that's one example. Another one would be Cisco AMP as an example of a breach detection. And I say this because Cisco AMP actually does anomaly and behavior-based security. It's not signature-based. So if you were to open that Word document, it would see why is every other Word document doing this, but this particular Word document is trying to open a back door. This Word document, there's no signature, so I don't want to, it's not day zero, it's the wrong terminology, but it's an unknown file, yet its behavior is unusual, it's malicious, and it's unusual. So anomaly and behavior is kicking on. So I would say Cisco AMP is one example. I would say tetration are examples of technologies that can get you visibility into the actual endpoint, the workload. Finally is the workplace. The workplace, as I mentioned, is access control type technology, but you need access control and you need monitoring. If you're just doing traditional segmentation, but you're not monitoring what's on the network, you're allowing basically the attacker to get a foothold. So I do agree that you need to segment IoT, you need to segment switches using basically VLANs, ACLs, et cetera, for your printers, for your IoT, for your employees, for your guests. All that is fine, and you can do super micro, however you want to do it, but you also need monitoring within those segments. It can't just be the gateway. Examples of what I'm talking about from Cisco, ICE, which is a network access control solution, is going to tell you who and what's coming on the network. However, a solution like StealthWatch, for example, would monitor what they're doing when they're actually on the network. The same could apply for like vulnerability scanners. Do I have any vulnerabilities? Well, whether you're using Nessus or Tenable, whether you're using Rapid7's Nexpos, whatever vulnerability scanner you want to use, if you integrate that with your access control technology, now you know who and what's coming on the network, and you're scanning them for vulnerabilities. So my whole point is, we need to go beyond access control and start to think about monitoring between the segments and think about posture. What are we checking when things come on the network? That's going to make your workplace much more secure. And to me, this is what I call a guideline. This is a guideline. If you look at what Zero Trust is trying to provide, these is the best practice for protecting your data. Zero trust of people, zero trust of process, and zero trust of the workplace. If you were to say, Joey, what from Cisco can accomplish this? I already talked about Duo. Duo is one example of a way to do multi-factor from the application itself. So you're constantly checking the user, hence zero trust of the user versus just one-time check and full access. Zero trust of the workload is being able to monitor the processes and create your actual whitelist. And then from there, ongoingly enforce that, as well as identify when you have unusual behavior like fileless attacks. I gave you two examples, tetration being one tool from Cisco, Cisco AMP being another example that can provide that value, going beyond antivirus. Which, by the way, AMP does have Claim AV, so there is antivirus if you want that, and AMP does vulnerability scanning. You may not know that as well, but AMP for endpoint will actually tell you what vulnerabilities are on an endpoint. Lastly, I talked about the workplace, where I mentioned segmentation is great, but you should consider network access control integrated with continuous monitoring. Not just monitoring the edge or a couple places, monitor the entire network. I gave you the example of StealthWatch being an example, where StealthWatch can be on the LAN, it can be inside your cloud, it can even be on the endpoints. And I also gave you the example of other integrations, such as a vulnerability scanner and other ways where you see what's happening. This is what Cisco would call our recommendations for Zero Trust. This is the Cisco Trust, Cisco reference architecture. But to me, take away the Cisco and call this a Zero Trust guideline. This is a guideline for best practice for security. Security is a cat and mouse game. If you think you're going to go buy a technology and you're going to be secure, things change. Give you a prime example. When the sandbox first came out, super effective. You would take like a honeypot sandbox combo, put it on the network. When you get an attacker, they would attack that first. You would get an alarm and you're done. What happened? Sandbox technology was reverse engineered by malware, and now a lot of the malware is sandbox aware. So whatever technology you're going to buy, I assure you, just like I do research, as you saw against the attackers, they're researching our tools. They have Palo Alto, Fortinet, Cisco in their lab. So you need to continuously invest and think about how to make security better. A lot of you probably have the old model of zero trust, multi-factor authentication, some continuous monitoring, and some segmentation. You need to do more. It's a cat and mouse game. You need to continue to invest in security. You need to invest in your people, your process, and your technology. And to me, this zero trust guideline can give you a lot of value. So I challenge all of you to think about what I talked about today, the challenges between the old zero trust model, and see how your security would defend against that. Now, as I mentioned, I'm here live, but a lot of you are not. And I want to make sure everybody feels warm and fuzzy with gifts. So here is a gift for all of you, wherever you're at in the world. I've written 2 comic books, and I'm working on a 3rd. This is not, by the way, a phishing attack. I'm not a jerk. This is real links that, to 2 comics I wrote. Both comics were hand-drawn by a cartoonist. I paid $10,000 US to have hand-drawn. They talk about a lot of the concepts. They're like Mr. Robot. They're the real stuff versus like these fake comics of like Superman flying around doing magic. We have real concepts, real screenshots. You can see the bottom right-hand corner. That's a screenshot from like ransomware, for example. And we talk about these concepts. So all of you can download these comics. They're super cool. I'm coming out with a 3rd one, hopefully later this year. But check those out. And I'm also giving you my personal email address because, as I mentioned, here at Cisco Live in Barcelona, I'm running a lab on Thursday. It's a 4-hour lab where you do basically attack and defend. And we're going to cover a lot of the zero trust concepts. We're going to cover like what happens if you get owned, if you get a backdoor, et cetera, et cetera. And I want you all to have the opportunity to do this lab. So if you email me and say, hey Joey, I saw your Master's Series presentation. I thought it was pretty cool, hopefully. And I want to do the hands-on challenge. Let me know. What I need you to do is go to Cisco dCloud. So it's cisco.dcloud.com. Create a free account. Let me know you're a free account, your username and your email, and ask when you want to do this lab, and I'll be more than happy. I don't care if 10,000 people have this request. I don't care. I have 5 data centers around the world that can offer this lab to anywhere at any time. It's called the Cyber Defense Clinic. I'm one of the creators of this. You can see it even though we're sold out on Thursday, but any of you can email me at jomuniz@cisco.com, and I will give you access to that lab. So I challenge you all to do a couple things. 1, check out the comics. They're a lot of fun. 2, reach out to me. Take the lab challenge. You will learn how to attack, what happens when you don't have the security, and then you will learn about how to defend against it. Not to mention it's real stuff. So if you just want to play with Kali Linux, if you want to play with some SIMs, we have like Splunk, QRadar, et cetera, you're welcome to do that. And the last challenge is, understand security is a journey, not a destination. You can't think because you've made investments that now you're secure. Things are constantly changing. Security, you don't become secure, it's a journey. You keep investing. You need to think about things like tabletop exercises, which is basically you go through scenarios like I talked about today. Think about today, the attacks I did. Walk through those scenarios. How would your company react? Do you have process in place? Who's responsible if like I give you that same backdoor? That's called a tabletop exercise. Maybe penetration testing, maybe auditing. Challenge your security and use things like the Zero Trust Guideline as a way to basically test and evaluate where you're at with security. So that's my challenge to all of you. Think about Zero Trust as a guideline. Think about how you apply to that guideline. Take my lab challenge, email me about that, and download the comic. I appreciate everybody's time. Hopefully now, if somebody asks you about Zero Trust, you're not going to have some stupid marketing FUD message. You're going to be able to talk about Zero Trust from a guideline best practice perspective, and more importantly, you can take that guideline and apply it against your own security. Again, my name is Joey Muniz. I'll be here all week. If you're live here at Spain, Barcelona, feel free to come talk to me, but thank you again for your time.